One of the hardest parts of learning how to write music for me was in the beginning. The problem was that everything I tried to write never sounded anywhere near as good as the music that I loved. And that problem felt impossible to navigate. How do all the artists I look up to write so many great songs, and I can barely get a single idea together? But over time, a uni degree, and learning to write 300 of my own songs, I learned that the more obvious details like a melody or a chord progression are rarely the thing that makes a song good or bad. It's the context that these ideas are presented in, and learning to build the context around your ideas is difficult. So this video is about the 5 biggest mistakes that I see amateur songwriters make, and hint hint, these 5 mistakes are all about context. Before we get into the list, some of these mistakes are actually stylistic choices in particular genres. So if I give an example that is a distinct stylistic aspect of your genre of choice, ignore the example and think about how the concept might apply to your genre. Mistake number 1 is unclear structures. One of the biggest problems is that lots of metal bands create a sound, and then that sound stays the same throughout the entire song without any change. The worst offenders will do this for an entire album. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have 15 different guitar tones to make one song sound musical, but if there's no tonal variation and all the riffs sound the same, it's hard to connect to the song. Same goes for bass lines, vocal lines, and drum grooves. Think about if you've got a map in the middle of the desert. Sure, it might be better than having no map at all, but you need to anchor yourself to something to make the rest of it make sense. Music works in a similar way. If you wrote a song that was some wailing synth wandering around, how can a listener engage with that? Now, obviously, avant-garde minimalist electronica is different to most metal songs. But if the song has no purpose or personality, the listener still can't engage. One of the most powerful tools you have is the drums. If a verse is at one energy level, give the chorus something different. It can be as simple as going from a closed hi-hat to an open hi-hat, or changing to a halftime or double time feel. Or it can be insanely complicated like some Danny Carey level shit. Whatever you want, just make it different. For the rest of the band, just keep 2 things in mind. Number 1, make sections distinct by including both chordal and riff-based sections. Number 2 is to change up the tone throughout the song. That could mean singing and screaming and whispering, or both clean and dirty guitars, or new instruments, or taking out instruments, or whatever you want. But just make sure that each section is distinct, because that distinction will invite the listener to engage in your music. Mistake number 2, dynamics. Another one of the biggest problems I see plaguing the genre of metal is dynamics. We're all spending our time trying to go to 11.
These go to 11.
And typically, we think anything other than that is poison. But it's not. Black looks blacker when it's next to white, and white looks whiter when it's next to black. If you're at 100%, that's it. You can't go further. So choose your battles. Now, this happens in all sorts of ways. The worst offenders are song structures, which we've already covered, double kicks, and guitar solos. Relentless double kicks are rarely the best choice. Sometimes they are, absolutely. But too many songwriters treat it like it's necessary for every second of music. And the same with guitar solos. Playing a million notes a second is great if it happens for a few seconds, but most of the time, 2 straight minutes of arpeggios is really hard to listen to. However, there are a few simple things you can do to resolve these issues. For example, look at your overall song structure and choose which parts you want to be the climax of the song. When you're listening back to the song, does it feel like an obvious climax, or is it more of a suggestive experience? To drive this point home, I'm sure we can all agree that when you're getting all down and dirty with your partner, it's better to have one huge climax than to have a more suggestive experience, whatever that means. Now, there's a million ways to make a song climax. That's up to you and your creativity. Just make sure that the parts that you want to be the climax feel like a climax. And for those of you who need to have those crazy high energy songs, it can be really useful to have at least one section that is quiet or has loads of silence. It will make the explosive parts feel way more intense. And in case it isn't obvious, this is exactly what breakdowns are for. Mistake number 3, over and underusing ideas. This may sound really strange, but overusing or underusing an idea can be equally detrimental to your song. To be fair though, overusing ideas is a more common problem. Metal songs are often written around one riff. Then that riff is turned into a whole song. It's fine if that riff is a really functional riff that can be deconstructed and morphed and changed to suit the various energetic needs of the song. But let's be real here. Most riffs are not good enough to be played for 30 seconds without change. And going the other way, just because your audience has heard something once doesn't mean that they shouldn't hear it again. Upon first listen, most people can't digest what they've just heard, so don't be afraid to play the same idea a few times because it gives people a chance to connect with your music. But striking a balance between these two is essential for good songwriting. Just remember that you have a special relationship with your music. You may be able to listen to your own riff on repeat for 30 minutes just vibing out and having fun. And you learn all the ins and outs of every note you play, every articulation you sing, and every drum you hit. So you've heard that idea 1,000 times and it feels familiar and comfortable to you. But just because you love that riff doesn't mean someone else wants to hear it for 5 minutes. And just because you've played that idea once doesn't mean someone else understood it. Mistake number 4, accepting bad ideas. I have a bit of a soft spot for this one because sometimes bad ideas are all you have. So you choose the best bad idea and move on with your life. The song is what it is, but for now, this is the best you can do, which is totally valid. In time and with experience, this will become far less of a problem. And I always advise writing more music rather than less because I'm of the opinion that something is better than nothing. I've written loads of songs that are simply bad ideas, and that's all they'll ever be. I'd learned what I needed to, I moved on, and hopefully I never have to listen to that shit again. The thing about this though is it's an essential part of the creative process. Sure, it's difficult, but you need to be ruthless with your ideas. You will know within yourself if you like the idea or not, and if it's bad, throw it out and try again. But sometimes you need to throw out a whole section to make it work. That's one of my most common problems. I will write music that I can't write a good vocal melody over. I'll try 10 different melodies, and in the end, when I hate them all, I delete the music underneath and try again. At the end of the day, if your song doesn't excite you the same way as your favorite songs do, your work is not done. Maybe you need someone to teach you how to improve it. Maybe you can work with a friend to find a solution, or maybe you can do it by yourself. But my solution is to write more music. The more you write, the better you get, and the easier it will be to know what ideas to keep and what ideas to throw away. Mistake number 5, jarring transitions. The craft of transitioning from one idea to the next is insanely complicated because no two transitions are the same. One of the easiest ways to do it is just to change suddenly with no preparation and bam, you're now in this part of the song. And to be fair, that's a valid choice. But in my experience, jarring changes rarely sound like mature songwriting decisions. It usually happens because whoever is writing doesn't know how to connect two ideas, so a sudden change is chosen because it's the easiest valid option. The most common cause of this problem is if you write two ideas in isolation. They aren't made for each other, so they need a bit or a lot of connective tissue to make sense. Personally, I practice this idea on purpose by writing two unrelated ideas and then spending forever finding ways to connect them. The result of that was that my transitions started becoming the most interesting part of my music. But I don't think that's practical for most people. I'm a nerd who loves songwriting. Of course I'm going to spend years nerding out about how to get some obscure result that no one cares about. So for some more practical advice, the best approach that I've found is to think about where your idea is leading you. For example, you're grooving along with your idea. Instead of forcing yourself in one direction or another, let the song reveal itself to you. When the song reveals itself to you, it'll feel more like you're figuring a song out. It's a weird change that happens. One moment you're actively creating and all options are open. Then all of a sudden you're like, wait, that part isn't right. It's supposed to go like this. And I know that that's a fairly vague instruction, but it's up to you to do. You need to listen to the music and allow the creative process to be what it is, rather than forcing your song to be one way or another. As a side note, when I write music, I like to have an intention. For example, a high energy song. But pretty much as soon as the ideas start flowing, I forget about my intention and let the song come to me. It can be really annoying if I want to write a high energy song, but keep writing ideas or whole songs that are melancholy. But eventually I'll write something that matches my intention and I'll be able to follow that. What this means is that I'm actively listening to what I write as I write it. If something doesn't match the mood or vibe, it gets replaced with something that is a better fit. This bypasses any reliance on jarring changes because I'm allowing the music to connect the ideas for me. So, they're the biggest mistakes that I see amateur songwriters make. To avoid most of these mistakes, the best thing to do is simply listen to your music and let it guide you. But until you can do that, write out a structure. Choose the moments you want to climax and write your ideas with consideration for what comes before and after. And once you've done that, throw out the ideas that aren't any good and replace them with better ideas. If you want to learn the easiest way to write a song, check this video here. If you'd like to learn how to use music theory to help your songwriting, check this video here.